Hey, and thank you for clicking play again, because I assume, well, A, you've seen part one where well, in fact, that's the only public part. That's the intention here, where I compare the Amiga 1200 with this 386DX, replicating my first PC and what it would have been like if I hadn't jumped to the PC, but had continued to enjoy Amiga through the slight upgrade, which was the A1200. And the reason I dismissed the A1200 back in the day was purely I didn't know that much about it. I just assumed it was just a cosmetic upgrade to the A500, and Andy Crane on the TV show Bad Influence in the UK, essentially dismissing it as exactly that and pointing out that a third of your games collection wouldn't work. And if you haven't seen the initial video comparison I did, I'll put a link in the description. It's worth your time. But I basically used the first PC games that I enjoyed, and I looked to see what their Amiga counterparts would have played like, and if I'd have really known any difference. So it's quite an interesting, I think, journey to go down. But as part of that was just over 30 minutes of video. It was actually over an hour and a half's worth of footage. So what this is a private video. If you're watching this, then you've either seen the link in a magazine article perhaps, or I have shared this directly with you, privately. It's not searchable on YouTube, but I just wanted to basically pick those bits up off the cutting room floor, because what we're going to look at is basically how I also compared, but I didn't have time to make it into the final edit. I compared the operating systems, the capacity of the machines, and I also discussed a little bit first-person shooters on the two platforms as well, in the context of the PC that I had back in the day. Enjoy. And look, just to round up from the PC side, yes, you almost instantly boot into DOS, and that's where you do most of your gaming. And Windows does its thing, and that's great. But let's remind ourselves of the reality, okay? You have to add a game card if you want to plug in a joystick, if not a sound card if you want to plug in a joystick and have decent sound. And then you've got this fun. Messing about with your AutoExec and your config sys files to manage your base and your extended memory. And is that extended memory EMS, XMS? Do you need a specific boot disk for a game like X-Wing, because the memory management is so hard? And look, it's thanks to those kind of challenges that I excelled in my early IT career, because even though I was in IT sales initially, I was the only person that knew how to get the most base memory free, because I'd had to do it for X-Wing to get it working with sound. So when I started working for a Sage Solution Center, and Sage Sovereign still hogged a heap of base memory, but clients were using Novell networks, and that had a heap of DOS drivers taking up base memory as well. Well, guess who stepped in and saved the day with a couple of clients? Yeah, all because I played X-Wing at home. So I have that to thank for it.
And so how does the Amiga compare to that in terms of operating system and what you get with it? Well, there's no DOS. There's no messing about with configurations. I know it can get a bit tricky the deeper you get into it, but it's usable out of the box. You don't have to worry about configurations for different games. If it doesn't load straight off the bat, then guess what? It's because you need to load it from the floppy disk, because it has its own boot. So you don't have the same problems as you do with DOS gaming.
All the fun of DOS gaming aside, obviously, Windows itself, what did it come with? Well, you had a decent file manager for a start, and there's a lot to be said for that. And what I'm looking at here is a Windows installation without MS Office, okay? Or Works. Okay, so at least there's an easy way to navigate around your files. That's great. And I now can't, there we go. You've also got Not that we call them games, but with Windows 3.1 and Windows 3, I believe as well. Correct me on Windows 3. But you've got Solitaire. We're all familiar with that. Started with 2 aces. I'll be right back. You got Minesweeper. Nothing special. Damn it. Second click. And I won't go into hearts because that's really a 3.11 thing. So we'll leave that aside. But what you do have as well, for all its sins, is you've got paint. And paint still survives to this day. Let's not forget that. It's a cube. It's a cube, isn't it? Is that Phil? I can't remember. Phil, is that you? Yeah, that's Phil. Oh, beautiful. Oh, bugger. It's like an Amiga demonstration. And you've also got, we all know about Notepad, but in Windows 3.1 you had Write, which is, for all intents and purposes, an OK word processor. And it came with the operating system. So Windows, DOS for gaming, Windows for your productivity out of the box. Not bad. Not bad at all.
Most Amigas came packaged with additional software. So along with the operating system, and no, there are no games in the operating system like, you know, Solitaire and Minesweeper. We're aware of that. But those other tools that we looked at, well, pretty much every Amiga ever sold came with DPaint. And what I've got here is DPaint 4, hard drive installable. You just drag it across into the folder, each disk. And DPaint 4, don't look at the registration code, is beautiful. Now DPaint 2 was the version I was most familiar with because that's what came with my A500 in the Batman pack. But DPaint 4, obviously, it's DPaint 4 AGA, so you've got a higher resolution, but you've also got, let's just draw some stuff on the screen, whatever. Okay, you've also got a heap of additional colours. I think it's 256 colours usable off the bat. It doesn't look like it here, but you can scroll through the palette. You've got palette B, palette C, palette D, and you can see this isn't changing what's here. I can throw some colours on the screen here, and those don't change, and I can throw some more colours on. So, you know, it's fantastic. You got all those colours available to you. Love it. And of course, being on the hard drive, you can just save straight to the hard drive, which again is great. And then what I've also installed on here is, after doing a bit of research, what did Amiga 1200s come packaged with? DPaint 4 AGA was common in the packs, as was a version of Wordsworth. Now, I thought it was Wordsworth 2, but I think it might have been Wordsworth 3, depending on which pack you bought. But it's Wordsworth 2 that I've installed here. And this is, again, specifically the AGA version of Wordsworth with the AGA fonts. And this is a lot more comprehensive. I haven't spent a lot of time in it, but this is a lot more comprehensive as a word processor and desktop publishing program than Microsoft Write. So you've got a nice stable operating system. Did I say stable? You've got a nice operating system. And it's GUI, primarily GUI driven, whereas with the PC, you're command line driven until you get into Windows, but you're really choosing, depending on what task you're doing, whether or not you're going to be in DOS or you're going to be in Windows. Windows hogging even more resources, whereas this is a nice, slim, fluid OS that's, you know, essentially the two combined. And games run from it if they're hard drive installable and if you've got enough RAM for certain games as well. And what also needs to be said is, in terms of storage, I mean, in the games folder, I've got Alien Breed 3D2, Gloom, Gloom Deluxe, Gunship 2000, Frontier, and Pinball Fantasies. and I've still got 20 meg free. Well, 19 meg free. What I remember about my original 386 was it came with a 65 meg hard drive and installed 3 games, especially if one of them was Doom shareware, and you really had to pick and choose Doom, shareware and X-Wing, and you were pretty much done, you know, and I had to get playing about with double density drivers and all of this kind of stuff. You know, I can't remember what it was called, but there was a disk space saving utility that would compress stuff unless it was in use. Whereas these games seem a lot more slimline from what I'm seeing here, which is, yeah, I mean, that's just great. I did promise we would have a brief discussion about first-person shooters. At the end of the day, the first-person shooter I experienced on my 386 was Wolfenstein 3D, and again, it was before I got a sound card. Let's take a quick look. I only have had the shareware version, so I didn't actually have all the chapters. So it's chapter 1 I'm most familiar with. Farts and beeps. Farts and beeps all the way. Ah! But the reality is I also played it with the sound card once I got one. Yes. And while you can clearly see Wolfenstein 3D played nice and smooth and sounded great, my experience of Doom, as I've discussed in another video, was really not great. It was like this. It really was like this. It's so bad. Okay, so let's go up to full screen. And that's high detail. Really not pleasant. Not pleasant at all. Jeez. This is how my Amstrad played it. Genuinely. This is how my Amstrad played Doom. So go down to low detail. It's better, but you really had to reduce the screen. And this is all relevant. This is all relevant. This is how I played Doom. Keep it in mind, the screen itself was only like a 10-inch monitor. Once you get down to that, you're starting to get playable. You know, this is playable in my book. Oh. It's not great. Okay, and so, what can we say for the A1200 in terms of first-person shooters to compete with that? At the end of the day, without an accelerator, your pickings are fairly thin on the A200. I've got installed here Alien Breed 3D2, but it's the 4 meg version, not the 2 meg version. And of course, for this test, I've only got 2 meg. So essentially, what you'd end up playing is a version without any texture maps in a lot of the areas. Okay. Gloom plays absolutely fine, but again, to play it off the hard drive, you need more than 2 meg. So that's what we're going to do, because I do have the discs here, is we can play it off the floppy drive. So let's do that, because I do want to show you how that runs on a stock A1200. And look, the reason why I'm keen to show you this on the stock 020 is because I've been playing this a lot. I've actually been playing it with my accelerator and with the extra RAM, but on the standard build. And I've fallen in love with this game. And the only reason the comparison is invalid is because this came out in '95. So in all honesty, you'd want to play it with the 020. With my 030, I can play this full screen, but let me show you what that looks like. I mean, it looks okay. Oh, actually, it's playing okay. I think it's more about what it looks like to the eyes. But Gloom Deluxe, which is a higher resolution, much better version than this, is the one to get running, and you need an accelerator for that. But this is this is actually really addictive. I can't stress it enough. You probably think I'm a bit mad, but it actually is so addictive, and it kicks Wolfenstein's butt. It really does. But the reality is, this came out in 1995. Wolfenstein, I believe, was 92, with Doom being 93. And I just wish Gloom had come sooner, along with Alien Breed 3D and also Alien Breed 3D2. Those would be the standout ones for me. What I guess I'm saying is the Amiga 1200 can do first-person shooters. Absolutely no doubt about that. And I'll put some footage in of Gloom Deluxe here so you can see how good they can look. But you've got to skew the timeline for the sake of this argument. So, yeah, it's unfortunately not really valid.
So thanks for watching that extra video. It doesn't change the outcome. I think it would have been interesting. I would have actually quite enjoyed having an A1200. The more I know about it, the more I love it. Doesn't change the fact that it needed to come with more RAM, and an accelerator would have been nice. So I think that would have been an extra expenditure that I'd have had to have made pretty quickly. But let's just counter that and say you don't have to have a monitor. Obviously, I could have just plugged this straight into a TV, whereas you can't really do that with a PC, through composite or even RF, but composite by then. Or of course, TVs with SCART were a common thing back then, and you get a beautiful signal RGB to SCART, which is what I was using throughout that comparison. And yes, the PC led me into a career in IT, but actually I think if I'd stayed with the Amiga, I perhaps would have more swiftly got a career in creative, in terms of, graphics, DTP, animation, maybe, who knows. I did eventually get there to a degree, but I went through a career in IT to segue into multimedia. Maybe I'd have got to multimedia quicker. Either way, I went to the PC back in the day, but this is a fine, absolutely fine alternative. And the more I use it, the more I appreciate what it can do. Thanks for watching.